Most people think the divide is income. It isn't. They think it's opportunity. It isn't. They think it's intelligence, luck, timing, connections. It isn't. The real divide is architectural, and architecture is invisible to the untrained eye. Two people can wake up in the same city, have access to the same internet, the same information, the same economy, the same 24 hours. One builds leverage, the other builds fatigue. From the outside, they look similar. From the inside, they are operating on completely different systems. And the tragedy is this: most people don't know they're running a system at all. They think they're choosing, but they're reacting. Reacting to bills, reacting to trends, reacting to urgency, reacting to what everyone else is doing. Average is not accidental. It is engineered. Engineered by distraction. Engineered by short-term dopamine. Engineered by environments that reward visibility and punish patience. You are not average because you lack ability. You are average because you were trained to prioritize motion over position. You were trained to move fast, to respond immediately, to stay busy, to measure progress by effort. But builders measure progress differently. They measure it in leverage. Leverage of time, leverage of capital, leverage of systems, leverage of attention. Average minds ask, how can I earn more? Builders ask, how can I own more? Average minds chase income. Builders build position, and position compounds. Income stops when you stop. Position pays while you sleep. But building position requires something most people avoid: restraint, patience, silence, long-term thinking in a culture obsessed with immediacy. The modern world is not designed to produce builders. It is designed to produce consumers. Consumers of content, consumers of trends, consumers of validation, consumers of urgency. Builders operate differently. They filter relentlessly. They say no often. They think in decades while others think in weeks. They are not rushed by headlines. They are not seduced by applause. They are not distracted by noise. They are positioned. And positioning is quiet. You rarely see it happening until it's too late to compete. The divide does not show up in lifestyle first. It shows up in decisions, in how long you're willing to wait, in how carefully you evaluate risk, in how deeply you protect your energy, in whether you chase opportunity or design it. Most people optimize effort. Few optimize architecture. Most people compete horizontally. Few expand vertically. Most people react to systems. Few build them. This audiobook is not motivational. It is structural. It will not tell you to hustle harder. It will show you how builders think differently, how they evaluate risk, how they filter opportunities, how they allocate energy, how they move without urgency, how they design systems instead of relying on effort. Because the divide is not between rich and poor. It is between those who position and those who react. And once you understand the architecture behind results, you stop blaming circumstances. You stop chasing speed. You stop competing for validation. You begin designing advantage. And design compounds. Silence. Let's begin with something uncomfortable. Average is not where you are. Average is how you think.
Chapter 1. Average is designed, not accidental. Most people believe average is the default. It isn't. Average is produced. It is engineered through repetition, through exposure, through incentives, through environment. And the most dangerous part? It feels normal. You were not born average. You were calibrated. Calibrated by what your environment rewarded. Calibrated by what it punished. Calibrated by what it ignored. Every system produces predictable outcomes. Education systems reward compliance. Corporate systems reward availability. Social systems reward visibility. Media systems reward immediacy. None of them reward deep positioning. So most people never learn it. They learn to respond. They learn to stay busy. They learn to equate motion with progress. And because everyone around them is moving, it feels productive. But productivity and positioning are not the same thing. Let's examine something quietly. Look at the average day. Wake up, check notifications, respond, commute, work, answer, react, scroll, consume, sleep. There is effort. There is exhaustion. There is motion. But where is leverage? Where is asset creation? Where is strategic placement? Where is long-term design? Average is not laziness. It is unstructured effort. And unstructured effort compounds nothing. It simply sustains activity. The modern world is exceptionally good at sustaining activity. It keeps you occupied. It keeps you stimulated. It keeps you informed. It keeps you reacting. But it rarely encourages you to step back and ask, what position am I building? Because position requires something the environment does not reward. Silence. Long stretches of focus. Delayed validation. Delayed reward. And most systems are not built to tolerate delay. They are built to reward immediacy. So you are trained, slowly, to prioritize short-term feedback. Messages. Likes. Deadlines. Pay cycles. Monthly metrics. Short horizons become your psychological default. And when short horizons become default, long-term architecture disappears. Now consider this. If you operate in an environment long enough, you begin to mirror it. If everyone around you measures success monthly, you begin to measure success monthly. If everyone around you chases visibility, you begin to chase visibility. If everyone around you values effort over leverage, you begin to value effort over leverage. Average is social reinforcement. It is a shared rhythm, a shared pace, a shared ceiling. And because it is shared, it feels safe. Builders operate differently. Not because they are immune to the environment, but because they question it. They ask, what game is this system encouraging me to play? And more importantly, is this the game that compounds? Most people never ask that question. They inherit the game. They accept the rules. They optimize inside it. But optimizing inside the wrong game does not create expansion. It creates exhaustion. You can work harder, earn more, learn more, consume more information, and still remain average. Because average is not about volume. It is about direction.
Let's introduce something foundational. There are two invisible forces shaping outcomes: incentives and defaults. Incentives tell you what is rewarded. Defaults tell you what is easiest. Most people live inside default behavior. Default spending, default scheduling, default risk tolerance, default career paths, default thinking patterns, and default rarely builds advantage. It sustains equilibrium. If you want to understand why most people remain average, study what is easy. It is easy to consume. It is easy to react. It is easy to say yes. It is easy to fill your time. It is easy to measure short-term gains. It is difficult to build systems. It is difficult to say no. It is difficult to wait. It is difficult to design leverage. And difficulty is rarely socially rewarded in the short term.
So average persists, not because people lack ambition, but because they lack architectural awareness. They do not see the structure shaping them. They believe they are making independent choices, but most of their choices are predictable responses to environment, to urgency, to visibility, to comfort. Now here is the uncomfortable shift. If average is designed, then it can be redesigned. But redesigning requires stepping outside the environment long enough to observe it. That requires detachment, and detachment feels unnatural when you've been trained to stay engaged. The builder's first advantage is not capital. It is awareness. Awareness of incentives, awareness of defaults, awareness of where effort leaks without creating leverage. Once you see the design, you can stop defending it. And once you stop defending it, you can begin positioning differently. Average is not where you are. Average is the system you are unconsciously cooperating with. And until you see the system, you will continue optimizing inside it. In the next chapter, we will examine the environment more closely, because the modern economy does not merely tolerate distraction, it monetizes it, and what is monetized is multiplied. Let's continue. Chapter 2. The Comfort Economy. If average is engineered, the next question becomes, engineered by what? Not by conspiracy, not by fate, by incentives. Modern economies do not simply produce goods, they produce behavior, and behavior follows reward. The most powerful force shaping your financial trajectory is not intelligence. It is environment. More specifically, what your environment rewards and what it quietly penalizes. Let's begin with something simple. Depth is rarely rewarded immediately. Distraction is rewarded instantly. Open your phone. Notifications. Messages. Short-form content. Trending topics. Breaking news. Reactions. Everything is optimized for immediacy. You are rewarded for attention, not for restraint. The system pays in dopamine, not in leverage. And dopamine compounds nothing. It simply resets desire. The modern economy monetizes your attention. The more reactive you become, the more valuable you become to it. Your clicks generate revenue. Your scrolling generates data. Your consumption generates cycles. And cycles sustain the system. Depth does not. Long-term positioning does not. Strategic patience does not. Those behaviors are economically quiet. They do not feed visibility metrics. They do not create rapid engagement. They do not stimulate frequent transactions. So they are not reinforced. Now observe something subtle. When you attempt to think long-term, you encounter friction. Silence feels uncomfortable. Waiting feels unproductive. Doing nothing feels like falling behind. That discomfort is not random. It is trained. You have been conditioned to associate movement with safety. Because movement produces feedback, and feedback produces reassurance. But reassurance is not leverage. Let's examine the phrase, stay productive. In most environments, productivity means visible output. Emails sent. Meetings attended. Tasks completed. Posts shared. Revenue generated. But productivity measured weekly rarely builds position measured decades from now. Builders do not ignore productivity. They redefine it. They ask, is this activity building structural advantage? If not, they reduce it. The comfort economy encourages the opposite. It encourages constant engagement. Always available. always reachable, always responsive. Availability becomes a virtue. Responsiveness becomes identity. But availability is expensive. Every yes costs positioning elsewhere. Every response consumes cognitive bandwidth. And bandwidth is finite. Now consider something more structural. Short-term cycles dominate economic life. Quarterly earnings, monthly bills, weekly targets, daily metrics. Very few systems reward 10-year thinking. So 10-year thinking becomes psychologically unnatural. When the environment reinforces short cycles repeatedly, your time horizon compresses. You begin measuring progress in months, then weeks, then days, eventually in notifications. That compression is invisible, but it is powerful. Because wealth, real wealth, expands on extended timelines. It compounds slowly. It matures quietly. It is built through patience that looks like stagnation to the reactive observer. And in a comfort economy, stagnation feels like failure.
So people abandon compounding prematurely. They pivot, they chase, they adjust constantly. They call it adaptability. Often it is impatience disguised as strategy. The comfort economy also rewards consumption more visibly than construction. Buying is easier than building. Spending is easier than structuring. Consuming ideas is easier than executing systems. Consumption feels like participation, but participation is not ownership. Ownership is structural. Ownership requires delayed gratification. Ownership requires concentrated focus. Ownership requires tolerating periods where nothing appears to be happening. And nothing appearing to happen is psychologically uncomfortable in an environment built on visible motion. Now look at social reinforcement. Visibility is rewarded. Exposure is rewarded. Virality is rewarded. Public wins are amplified. Private discipline is invisible. The builder's work is often quiet. It does not trend. It does not generate applause. It compounds outside the spotlight. And because it lacks external validation, it requires internal conviction. That is rare. Most people are not unwilling to build. They are unwilling to build without immediate feedback. The comfort economy understands this deeply. So it creates continuous feedback loops. Likes, shares, bonuses, notifications, scoreboards. You feel seen. You feel engaged. You feel in motion. But motion without direction creates circles. And circles feel like progress until you zoom out. Zooming out is difficult when everything is designed to keep you zoomed in. Now let's move deeper. Comfort is not simply physical ease. It is cognitive ease. The ease of default. The ease of following established paths. The ease of choosing what everyone else is choosing. The ease of thinking what everyone else is thinking. The economy rewards conformity through safety. Follow the standard path. Earn incrementally. Upgrade lifestyle. Increase visible markers. Repeat. There is nothing inherently wrong with this path, but it rarely creates leverage. It sustains linear growth. Linear growth is comfortable. Leverage is exponential. Exponential curves are volatile early. They require front-loaded discomfort. They require asymmetry. And asymmetry is psychologically difficult because it does not look stable at the beginning. Now ask a harder question. Why does distraction feel relaxing? Because distraction removes responsibility for long-term design. If you are busy reacting, you are not accountable for architecture. If you are constantly engaged, you are not required to step back. And stepping back is where uncomfortable truths appear. What am I building? What do I own? What compounds if I stop working? What advantage exists independent of my effort? The comfort economy keeps these questions distant, because answering them may lead you to disengage from cycles that feed it. This is not an accusation. It is structural reality. Systems optimize for their own continuation, and your attention fuels continuation. Builders understand this. They design friction into their lives intentionally. They limit inputs. They reduce reactive exposure. They protect cognitive bandwidth. Not because they are antisocial, but because leverage requires depth. Depth requires focus. Focus requires withdrawal from noise. Noise is profitable. Silence is not. And what is not profitable is rarely amplified. Now consider another structural factor: urgency. Urgency creates transactions, flash sales, market spikes, trending opportunities, breaking news. Urgency compresses decision windows, and compressed decisions favor reaction over analysis. The comfort economy thrives on urgency. Builders neutralize it. They expand decision timelines whenever possible. They price risk deliberately. They refuse to let emotional spikes dictate structural moves. This is not slowness. It is strategic pacing. There is a difference. Now reflect on your own environment. What behaviors are consistently rewarded? Speed? Visibility? Compliance? Busyness? Consumption? And which behaviors are quietly penalized? Patience? Independence? Long-term thinking? Saying no? Deep focus? Where incentives flow, behavior follows. Most people follow incentives unconsciously. Builders question them. They ask, if I continue responding to this system exactly as designed, where will it position me in 10 years? Few people project that far. The comfort economy rarely encourages projection beyond immediate cycles. So the divide widens. Not because builders work harder, but because they operate on extended timelines. They opt out of certain feedback loops. They choose fewer inputs. They prioritize asymmetry. They tolerate discomfort. They sacrifice immediate applause for long-term advantage. And advantage compounds invisibly, until it becomes visible. By then, it appears sudden. It was never sudden. It was structured. In the next chapter, we move into something subtle but critical: motion. Why being busy rarely means you are building leverage. Because the comfort economy does not discourage motion. It encourages it. And motion feels productive, until you realized it produced no position. Let's continue.
Chapter 3: Motion without position. There is a form of productivity that feels powerful. It looks disciplined. It feels responsible. It earns praise, and it builds almost nothing. It is called motion. Motion is activity without structural advancement. It is movement that does not improve your position. It is effort that does not compound. And modern systems reward it constantly. Look around. People are working, replying, posting, meeting, trading time for money, upgrading skills, attending events, chasing opportunities. There is movement everywhere, yet leverage remains scarce. Why? Because movement and positioning are not the same thing. Position is structural, motion is behavioral. Position changes your advantage, motion changes your fatigue. You can move endlessly without improving your structural leverage. Let's define leverage clearly. Leverage is advantage that works independently of your immediate effort. Assets, systems, ownership, intellectual property, network positioning, reputation in specific high-value arenas, distribution control, capital allocation structures. Those are positional. Answering emails is not positional. Attending meetings is rarely positional. Consuming content is not positional. Even earning income is not automatically positional. Income sustains lifestyle. Position builds autonomy. The modern professional life encourages motion. You are evaluated on visible activity, responsiveness, engagement, output volume. And because evaluation shapes behavior, you optimize for what is measured. Most workplaces measure effort. Few measure leverage. So people become efficient at visible activity. But efficiency in the wrong direction compounds nothing. Consider this quietly. If you stop working for 30 days, what continues? If the answer is nothing, you are operating in motion. If something continues to generate value, you have position. Motion produces immediate output. Position produces durable advantage. One is exhausting, the other is liberating. Now here is the dangerous part. Motion feels like progress. You feel tired. You feel productive. You feel responsible. You feel engaged. Fatigue creates the illusion of advancement, but fatigue is not evidence of leverage. It is evidence of effort. Effort without structure decays daily. You wake up at zero again. Let's examine something structural. Many people optimize their calendar. Few optimize their positioning. They schedule tasks efficiently, but never ask, is this task improving my structural advantage? A builder asks that question constantly. Average thinking assumes, if I stay active long enough, something will change. Builder thinking asks, if this activity does not create leverage, why am I doing it? There is a fundamental difference. Now let's go deeper. Motion is emotionally comfortable. Why? Because it avoids strategic risk. If you are always busy, you never have to confront the question of direction. If you are always responding, you never have to design. Design requires stepping out of motion, and stepping out of motion feels dangerous. It feels unproductive. It feels like falling behind. That feeling is trained. The comfort economy equates inactivity with loss. But inactivity and stillness are different. Stillness is strategic. It is evaluation. It is calibration. It is structural thinking. Motion is reactive. It is engagement without positioning. Let's introduce a quiet truth. Most people are not failing because they lack effort. They are stagnating because their effort lacks asymmetry. Asymmetry means small effort, large outcome.
Motion is linear. Position is exponential. Linear effort scales with time. Exponential advantage scales with structure. Now observe common career paths. Climb incrementally. Increase salary gradually. Upgrade lifestyle proportionally. That is linear. There is nothing wrong with linear growth, but linear growth is fragile.
It depends entirely on continued input. If input stops, output stops. Builders seek asymmetry. They look for opportunities where input is front-loaded, where systems carry weight over time, where ownership replaces constant participation, where control over distribution outperforms constant labor. They ask, what can I build once that pays repeatedly? Motion asks, what can I do today to stay active? These questions produce radically different futures. Now consider something psychological. Motion provides reassurance. It tells you that you are trying. It tells you that you are engaged. It tells you that you are not falling behind. Position often provides silence. It requires patience. It requires ignoring visible competition. It requires delaying comparison. That silence is uncomfortable in a world addicted to feedback. So people default to motion, because motion generates signals. Signals of relevance, signals of progress, signals of effort. But signals are not substance. Substance is structural. Now examine the phrase, I'm working on it. Working on what? If the answer is not structural leverage, you are refining motion. Motion also has a social advantage. It is visible. You can post about it, talk about it, demonstrate it. Position is less visible. Few people announce, I am building a quiet ownership stake. Few people celebrate, I declined 5 opportunities to protect focus. Those moves are invisible, but invisibility is often a prerequisite for compounding. Let's explore another angle. Motion keeps you in competition. Position reduces competition. If you are trading time for money, you compete with everyone willing to trade time. If you build systems, you compete structurally. Competition narrows, advantage widens. Builders are not obsessed with being busy, they're obsessed with being positioned. They eliminate low-leverage activity. They reduce reactive obligations. They consolidate effort into fewer, higher-upside moves. This often makes them appear less active, but appearance is irrelevant. Architecture is everything. Now consider the hidden cost of motion. Cognitive depletion. Every decision consumes energy. Every small task fragments attention. Fragmented attention reduces depth. Reduced depth reduces quality of strategic thought. Reduced strategic thought eliminates asymmetry. So motion not only consumes time, it consumes the capacity to design leverage. That is its most dangerous cost. Now ask yourself something uncomfortable. Are you busy or are you building? Are you accumulating tasks or accumulating advantage? If your schedule vanished tomorrow, what remains? If the answer is nothing durable, you are optimizing motion, not position. The divide widens here. Average minds equate busyness with ambition. Builder minds equate leverage with intelligence. Ambition without structure burns out. Structure without noise compounds quietly. There is nothing glamorous about positioning. It often looks slow. It often looks like underperformance compared to peers. It often looks like inactivity, until it crosses an invisible threshold, and then it looks inevitable. Most overnight success stories are positional stories. Years of silent architecture, minimal visible motion, sudden structural breakout. The public sees the breakout. They do not see the positioning. So they replicate the visible moment, not the invisible foundation. and replication fails. Now we move to the core question. If motion is easy and socially rewarded, how do builders escape it? They implement filters. They evaluate every opportunity through leverage potential. They ask, does this improve my structural advantage? Does this create ownership? Does this expand control? Does this compound? If not, they decline. Saying no is positional. Saying yes is easy. Every yes expands motion. Every no protects architecture. That discipline separates average from builder. Not intelligence, not luck, not access, but filtration. In the next chapter, we transition into something more precise: income versus position. Because many people believe earning more automatically improves leverage. It does not. Income can fuel position, or it can fuel motion. The difference is architectural, and that is where the real divide begins to reveal itself. Let's continue.
Chapter 4. Income versus position. There is a belief that earning more equals progress. It doesn't. Income is motion. Position is structure. Income is temporary flow. Position is structural advantage. Most people optimize income. Few optimize position, and the divide widens quietly from that difference. Let's define income clearly. Income is what you receive in exchange for participation: your time, your skill, your presence, your output. It is conditional. If you stop participating, it stops flowing. Position is different. Position is structural control, ownership, equity, systems, distribution, intellectual property, capital allocation, network leverage. Position produces income. Income does not automatically produce position. This is where most confusion begins. Many people increase income and assume they are advancing structurally. But higher income without structural conversion is just amplified motion. It increases lifestyle, it increases obligations, it increases visible markers, but it does not necessarily increase leverage. Let's look at two individuals. Person A increases salary from $60,000 to $120,000. Person B earns $60,000 but acquires ownership in a scalable asset. From the outside, Person A appears to be advancing faster. Higher income, higher lifestyle, higher visibility. But structural leverage may be forming elsewhere. Income scales linearly. Position scales asymmetrically. Linear growth feels satisfying. Asymmetrical growth feels uncertain early. And uncertainty discourages average thinking. Now observe the psychological trap. Income provides immediate feedback. More money, more validation, more visible upgrades. Position often provides delayed feedback. Ownership might not pay immediately. Systems require setup before yield. Equity compounds quietly. So the mind gravitates toward income optimization because it is visible, because it is rewarded socially, because it produces applause. Position often produces silence, and silence is uncomfortable, especially in environments that equate visibility with success. Now ask a sharper question. What happens if you stop working for 90 days? If your financial stability collapses entirely, your structure is income dependent. If some systems continue producing value, you have position. Income dependence creates fragility. Position creates resilience. Fragility requires constant participation. Resilience tolerates temporary withdrawal. Builders pursue resilience. Average thinking pursues maximization of active income. The two paths feel similar early. They diverge over time. Let's explore a deeper layer. Income often increases consumption capacity. Position increases control capacity.
Consumption improves lifestyle. Control improves leverage. Most people increase consumption proportionally with income. Few convert income into structural ownership. The system encourages this. Credit access expands with income. Lifestyle marketing intensifies with income. Social expectations rise with income. Upgrades become normalized. So income expands lifestyle obligations. Obligations require continued income. Continued income requires continued motion. Motion sustains the loop. Position breaks the loop. Position converts temporary flow into durable advantage. Now consider this structural observation. You can have high income and low position. You cannot have high position without income emerging eventually. Income is an output. Position is a multiplier. If income is high but position is low, growth plateaus at effort capacity. If position increases, income can scale beyond effort. Builders prioritize multipliers. Average thinking prioritizes increases. An increase is additive. A multiplier is exponential. Additive growth is stable but limited. Multiplicative growth is volatile early but expansive long-term. Most people choose stability. Builders choose asymmetry. Now let's examine control. Income gives you spending power. Position gives you negotiation power. Spending power is external. Negotiation power is structural. If you control distribution, you negotiate differently. If you own assets, you negotiate differently. If you have independent income streams, you negotiate differently. Income without position often reduces negotiation leverage. Why? Because dependency narrows optionality. Optionality is structural. If you have alternatives, you have leverage. If you do not, you have motion. Optionality allows patience. Patience increases decision quality. Decision quality compounds. Now observe something subtle. Income is competitive. Position is selective. You compete for jobs. You compete for promotions. You compete for clients. Position reduces competition. Ownership narrows the field. Control over niche assets narrows the field. Strategic placement narrows the field. Builders aim to reduce competitive density. Average thinking stays inside competitive pools. Competition compresses margins. Position expands them. Let's move into time horizons. Income is measured monthly. Position is measured in decades. If your thinking horizon is short, income optimization feels urgent. If your horizon is extended, position becomes obvious. Short horizons magnify immediate gains. Long horizons magnify compounding. The comfort economy reinforces short cycles. Quarterly targets, monthly reviews, weekly metrics. Builders design long arcs, 10-year leverage, 20-year capital positioning, multi-decade brand equity. Those arcs look invisible early, but invisibility does not mean stagnation. It means incubation. Now let's confront something uncomfortable. Many people increase income and feel powerful. That power is conditional. Conditional power creates anxiety. Anxiety encourages more income chasing. Income chasing increases motion. Motion increases fragility. Fragility increases fear. Fear narrows decision windows. Narrow windows reduce strategic thought. The loop tightens. Position reduces anxiety because position reduces dependency. Reduced dependency increases calm. Calm improves analysis. Analysis improves positioning. The loop shifts. Now consider asset conversion. When income rises, what percentage converts into ownership? If conversion is low, structural advantage remains flat. If conversion is deliberate, leverage expands. The key difference is intentionality. Builders allocate income toward position. Average thinking allocates income toward lifestyle. Lifestyle is consumptive. Position is accumulative. One decays, one compounds. Let's look at energy. Income optimization consumes energy daily. Position design consumes energy front-loaded. Front-loaded energy is uncomfortable, but it reduces future strain. This is why builders often appear to underperform socially early. They redirect surplus toward structural leverage, while others redirect surplus toward visible consumption. The difference widens quietly. Now let's introduce strategic sequencing. Builders do not reject income. They use income as fuel. Fuel for ownership, fuel for systems, fuel for capital allocation. Income is not the enemy. Dependency on income is. Dependency creates constraint. Constraint limits positioning. Freedom of positioning requires surplus. Surplus requires discipline. Discipline requires long-term orientation. Now ask yourself, is your income increasing your independence or increasing your obligations? That answer reveals trajectory. The divide emerges here. Average thinking asks, how can I earn more this year? Builder thinking asks, how can I improve my structural advantage this decade? One optimizes cash flow, the other optimizes control. Cash flow sustains activity. Control shapes opportunity. In the next chapter, we go deeper into time itself, because position is impossible without extended time horizons. And extended time horizons require a psychological shift most people resist: the long game advantage. Let's continue.
Chapter 5. The Long Game Advantage. Most people overestimate what can happen in a year. They underestimate what can happen in 10. That imbalance shapes everything. The average time horizon is short, measured in months, quarters, annual cycles, promotions, bonuses, market swings, performance reviews. Short cycles create short thinking, and short thinking eliminates compounding. Compounding is not dramatic. It is not visible early. It is quiet. And quiet progress is psychologically difficult in a culture addicted to visible acceleration. Builders understand something most ignore. Time is not neutral. Time amplifies structure. If your structure is weak, time exposes it. If your structure is strong, time multiplies it. Average thinking treats time as something to endure. Builder thinking treats time as something to deploy. There is a difference. Let's examine how time is typically used. Work, spend, repeat. Income arrives. Consumption follows. Cycle resets. Time passes. Position remains largely unchanged. This is linear time usage. Linear time produces linear outcomes. Builders operate on exponential time usage. They front-load design. They build systems. They acquire assets. They invest in asymmetrical opportunities. Then they let time do the heavy lifting. Time rewards consistency. But consistency without direction compounds nothing. Direction determines trajectory. Trajectory determines magnitude. Now let's explore patience. Patience is often misunderstood as passivity. It isn't. Passive waiting is drift. Strategic patience is structured positioning. Drift is inactivity without intention. Strategic patience is deliberate delay for asymmetric gain. The difference is subtle but critical. Average thinking sees waiting as lost opportunity. Builder thinking sees premature action as structural damage. In fast-moving environments, action feels safe. It creates momentum.
It produces feedback. But premature action often locks you into suboptimal positioning. Builders expand decision windows. They reduce urgency. They ask, what does this look like in 5 years? What does this look like in 10? How does this compound? Most people cannot answer those questions because they are not thinking that far. The comfort economy compresses horizons. Builders stretch them. Let's look at skill acquisition. Average thinking asks, how quickly can I monetize this? Builder thinking asks, how valuable can this become over a decade? Short-term monetization caps upside. Long-term mastery expands asymmetry. Depth compounds. Surface engagement decays. The same applies to capital. Short-term trading seeks volatility. Long-term ownership seeks structural growth. Volatility creates adrenaline. Ownership creates leverage. Adrenaline feels like progress. Leverage feels slow. But leverage wins over extended time. Now consider relationships. Average thinking optimizes networks for access. Builder thinking optimizes networks for alignment. Access is transactional. Alignment compounds. Trust compounds. Reputation compounds. Time deepens high-quality positioning. Shallow engagement fades quickly. The long game requires something uncomfortable. It requires ignoring short-term comparison. Comparison is immediate. Compounding is delayed. If you compare yourself constantly to visible outcomes, you will abandon long arcs prematurely. Builders detach from constant benchmarking. They focus on trajectory. Trajectory matters more than speed. A slower trajectory pointed in the right direction outperforms rapid misalignment. Now let's introduce asymmetry again. The long game advantage is rooted in asymmetric outcomes. Small early investments producing outsized later returns. This requires enduring long periods where the returns look negligible. That endurance is psychological. Most people abandon leverage before it matures, because the early stage feels indistinguishable from stagnation. Builders tolerate the flat curve. They understand that exponential growth always appears linear early. They are not discouraged by invisible progress. They expect it. Now examine opportunity selection. Short-term thinking prioritizes speed of payoff. Long-term thinking prioritizes scale of payoff. Speed feels productive. Scale feels distant. But scale transforms. Speed sustains. In short cycles, you optimize for survival. In long cycles, you optimize for dominance. Survival thinking maintains position. Dominance thinking expands it. Most people are not in danger, but they behave as if they are. They prioritize immediate security. Builders secure enough to think long-term. Security creates bandwidth. Bandwidth enables design. Design compounds. Let's explore identity. Average identity is short-term reactive. Builder identity is long-term strategic. Identity determines decision patterns. If you identify as someone who needs immediate feedback, you will choose short cycles. If you identify as someone building over decades, you will tolerate silence. Patience stabilizes positioning. Positioning stabilizes compounding. This chain is architectural. Now consider wealth itself. Wealth is rarely built in short bursts. It is built through layered accumulation, ownership, reinvestment, compounding, deferred gratification. The long game advantage is not glamorous. It is repetitive. It is disciplined. It is often boring. And boredom is intolerable to short-term thinkers. The comfort economy amplifies novelty. Novelty interrupts compounding. Every pivot resets progress. Every new direction restarts the curve. Builders pivot rarely. When they do, it is structural, not emotional. They adjust frameworks, not impulses. Now ask yourself, what decisions are you making based on one-year outcomes? What decisions would you make differently if your horizon were 10 years? The answers expose your architecture. A 10-year lens changes everything. Career choices, investment decisions, skill development, energy allocation, risk tolerance. Short horizons magnify fear. Long horizons reduce volatility. Volatility smooths over extended timelines. Patience reduces emotional reactivity. Emotional stability improves decision quality. Decision quality compounds.
Now let's move into risk perception. Short-term thinkers fear volatility. Long-term thinkers price it. Over extended periods, volatility smooths. The builder sees fluctuation as temporary. The average mind sees fluctuation as threat. Threat triggers reaction. Reaction interrupts positioning. The divide widens. Builders build through cycles. Average thinking reacts to cycles. Time magnifies this difference. Cycles come and go. Structures remain. If you own structure, cycles benefit you. If you trade motion, cycles exhaust you. The long game advantage is not about waiting. It is about structuring in a way that time becomes your ally. Time cannot save poor positioning, but it can amplify intelligent positioning beyond what effort alone could achieve. Most people attempt to accelerate outcomes. Acceleration without structure increases fragility. Builders accelerate selectively. They allow time to carry weight. They resist artificial urgency. They resist premature scaling. They protect the arc. The arc is trajectory over time. Protecting the arc requires saying no to short-term noise. It requires declining visible wins that compromise structural alignment. This restraint is invisible to observers, but it compounds internally. Now reflect on something quietly. If you disappeared for 1 year, what would continue growing? What systems remain active? What assets appreciate? What relationships deepen? What intellectual capital accumulates? If the answer is nothing meaningful, you are dependent on motion. If the answer includes structural growth, you are building position. The long game advantage separates those who look active from those who are expanding. In the next chapter, we refine patience further. Because patience alone is insufficient. It must be strategic. Waiting without design is drift. Strategic patience is placement, and placement is where asymmetry begins. Let's continue. Chapter 6. Strategic Patience. Patience is often misunderstood. Most people interpret it as delay, as inactivity, as passivity, as doing nothing. That is not patience. That is drift. Drift is absence of direction. Strategic patience is different. Strategic patience is structured waiting. It is deliberate non-action. It is controlled timing. It is refusal to move prematurely. It is knowing that timing is a structural advantage. Average thinking equates speed with competence. Builders equate timing with intelligence. There is a difference. Speed amplifies momentum. Timing amplifies leverage. Momentum can be wasted. Leverage compounds. Now consider how urgency shapes behavior. Urgency compresses decision windows. Compressed windows reduce analysis. Reduced analysis increases error probability. Most costly decisions are not made from ignorance. They are made from impatience. The comfort economy conditions urgency. Flash sales, market spikes, trending opportunities, rapid cycles. You are trained to act quickly, because quick action generates transactions. But builders do not respond to external urgency automatically. They expand their internal decision window. They ask, is this aligned with my positioning? Is this asymmetric? Is this structural? If the answer is unclear, they wait. Waiting filters noise. Noise fades quickly. Signal persists. Strategic patience allows signal to reveal itself. Now let's explore something subtle. The inability to wait is often emotional. Fear of missing out. Fear of falling behind. Fear of stagnation. Fear that others are advancing faster. These fears compress time perception. When you feel behind, you accelerate. Acceleration without structure increases fragility. Builders detach from competitive pacing. They operate on internal clocks. Internal clocks are calibrated to trajectory, not comparison. Comparison is short-term. Trajectory is long-term. This distinction matters. Now examine opportunity. Opportunities do not disappear constantly. Most reappear in different forms. If something truly aligns with your positioning, it will not require panic. Panic is often a sign of misalignment. When urgency dominates, discipline collapses. Strategic patience restores discipline. It creates friction. Friction improves decision quality. Quality compounds. Let's explore markets. In volatile environments, reactive actors dominate headlines. Builders dominate outcomes. Reactive actors chase spikes. Builders accumulate quietly. Reactive actors celebrate short wins. Builders accumulate asymmetry. Time reveals the difference. Strategic patience requires confidence, not arrogance. Confidence in process. Confidence in positioning. Confidence in evaluation. Average thinking seeks certainty. Builders accept calculated uncertainty. There is no certainty in positioning. There is probability. Probability improves with analysis. Analysis requires time. Time requires patience. Now consider skill development. Average thinking seeks rapid monetization. Builders seek structural mastery. Mastery takes time. Time requires sustained focus. Focus requires reducing noise. Noise reduction requires discipline. Discipline requires identity. Identity determines patience capacity. If your identity depends on visible progress, patience will feel threatening. If your identity depends on structural growth, patience will feel logical. Identity precedes timing. Now let's explore compounding again. Compounding does not reward impulsive switching. It rewards consistency. Every premature pivot resets momentum. Every reset delays asymmetry. Most people pivot too early. They abandon direction before structure matures. Because early phases feel slow. Slow feels like failure. But slow is often incubation. Strategic patience allows incubation to mature. Now consider capital allocation. If you deploy capital impulsively, volatility dominates you. If you deploy capital deliberately, time dominates volatility.
Volatility decreases over extended horizons. Patience absorbs fluctuation. Impatience magnifies it. The builder understands that fluctuation is not threat. It is environment. Environment is navigated, not feared. Strategic patience is navigation. It avoids unnecessary exposure. It reduces frequency of decision. Decision frequency matters. More decisions increase error exposure. Fewer high-quality decisions improve leverage. Builders reduce decision frequency. They design systems. Systems automate consistency. Consistency compounds. Let's shift to relationships. Strategic patience applies to partnerships. Average thinking rushes alignment. Builders test alignment over time. Trust compounds. Trust cannot be accelerated artificially. Strategic patience protects positioning from misaligned associations. Misalignment erodes leverage. Builders value durable alignment over rapid expansion. Now examine risk. Average thinking avoids risk entirely or embraces it impulsively. Builders price risk. Pricing risk requires time. Time allows evaluation. Evaluation reduces catastrophic exposure. Lower downside increases longevity. Longevity is underrated. Most leverage is built by surviving long enough. Impatience shortens lifespan in positioning. Now examine energy. Energy is finite. Urgency drains energy. Patience conserves it. Conserved energy improves clarity. Clarity improves design. Design improves leverage. Strategic patience is energy management. It prevents reactive depletion. Builders understand that exhaustion reduces decision quality. Reduced quality increases structural mistakes. Mistakes compound negatively. Patience reduces mistakes. Fewer mistakes increase durability. Durability compounds. Let's examine attention. Attention fragmentation reduces strategic thought. Strategic patience requires attention protection. Builders limit inputs. They limit reaction cycles. They protect deep work periods. Deep work produces asymmetric insight. Insight produces advantage. Advantage compounds. Without patience, insight cannot mature. Now consider reputation. Reputation built slowly is durable. Reputation built quickly is fragile. Durable reputation increases leverage. Fragile reputation requires constant defense. Strategic patience builds credibility through consistency. Consistency builds trust. Trust increases optionality. Optionality is structural advantage.
Now let's address boredom. Strategic patience often feels boring. Boredom signals absence of stimulation. Stimulation is not leverage. Leverage is quiet. Builders tolerate boredom because they understand that boredom often accompanies structural work. Average thinking seeks constant stimulation. Stimulation resets focus. Focus loss delays positioning. Positioning requires sustained depth. Depth requires patience. Now reflect on timing itself. There is a difference between missing an opportunity and declining misalignment. Most people cannot distinguish the two, so they act prematurely. Builders decline frequently. Declining improves clarity. Clarity sharpens filters. Filters reduce exposure. Reduced exposure protects positioning. Strategic patience strengthens filters. Now consider a 10-year horizon again. Most structural advantages emerge after sustained positioning. Property ownership, equity accumulation, brand authority, distribution networks, intellectual capital, all require time. Patience is not optional. It is prerequisite. Impatience interrupts maturation. Maturation compounds. Now ask yourself, How often do you act because something feels urgent? How often do you act because others are acting? How often do you act because waiting feels uncomfortable? These are not neutral triggers. They are signals of compressed thinking. Strategic patience expands thinking. Expansion reduces error. Reduced error increases advantage. The divide between average and builder is rarely visible in daily behavior. It is visible in restraint, in what is not done, in what is delayed, in what is filtered out. Patience is not weakness. It is structural intelligence. It is the ability to let time amplify advantage without rushing the process. In the next chapter, we refine this further because patience must be paired with evaluation. Builders do not simply wait, they filter, and the filter determines the quality of opportunity selection. That filter is leverage. Let's continue.
Chapter 7. The Leverage Filter. The average mind asks, will this make me money? The builder asks, does this increase my leverage? That single shift changes outcomes over decades. Income answers today. Leverage answers the next 10 years. Most people evaluate opportunities emotionally. Excitement, fear of missing out, validation, speed, social proof. Builders evaluate structurally. Scale, durability, control, asymmetry, optionality. This is the leverage filter. And if you do not have one, you are reacting to momentum instead of building position. Let's define leverage clearly. Leverage is the ability to produce outsized outcomes relative to effort. It allows small inputs to create disproportionate outputs. Without leverage, effort remains linear. With leverage, effort becomes exponential. There are only a few forms of true leverage: capital, technology, distribution, reputation, systems, ownership. Everything else is labor. Labor earns. Leverage multiplies. Now examine the average professional. They trade time for money. Their effort directly determines output. When effort stops, income stops. That is not leverage. That is dependence. Builders ask, how can I disconnect income from effort? Not immediately, but structurally. Ownership of assets creates leverage. Equity compounds without hourly presence. Systems automate consistency. Distribution expands reach without proportional labor. Reputation attracts opportunity without constant pursuit. Technology scales output beyond physical limitation. This is structural thinking. Now examine opportunity evaluation. When presented with a decision, average thinking asks, how much can I make? Builder thinking asks, if this works, how large can it become? That is asymmetry. Small upside, large downside, reject. Large upside, controlled downside, evaluate. Asymmetry is the core of leverage. Most people seek certainty. Builders seek favorable risk-reward structure. Let's refine this further. A leveraged opportunity must meet 4 criteria. It scales. It compounds. It protects downside. It increases optionality. If an opportunity fails those filters, it is labor disguised as opportunity. Scale means the upside is not capped by time. Compounding means the value grows over time without constant reinvention. Downside protection ensures survivability. Optionality increases future choices. Now examine common decisions. Taking a job that increases income but not ownership. That increases cash flow but not leverage. Learning a skill that enhances your irreplaceability. That increases leverage. Building an audience. Leverage.
owning equity instead of salary alone. Leverage. Automating recurring processes. Leverage. Improving reputation through depth instead of volume. Leverage. The average mind sees activity. The builder sees architecture. Architecture compounds. Activity exhausts. Now consider something subtle. Many opportunities appear profitable in the short term. Few increase leverage. A short-term project may generate immediate income. But if it does not create reusable assets, it resets at completion. Builders prefer opportunities that leave residue. Residue is long-term value left behind. Intellectual property. Systems. Distribution. Equity. Network strength. Brand authority. If a project leaves nothing behind, it is a transaction. Transactions do not build position. Residue builds position. Now examine leverage through time. A leveraged decision may feel slower initially because scale requires setup. Linear decisions feel productive immediately because effort maps directly to output. Builders tolerate delayed validation because leverage requires initial investment. The comfort economy rewards visible activity. Leverage is often invisible early. That is why most ignore it. Now examine career architecture. The average path is vertical, promotion-based. Builders design diagonally, positioning-based. Vertical movement increases income. Diagonal movement increases control. Control is leverage. Control reduces dependency. Dependency limits optionality. Optionality increases power. This chain defines expansion. Now consider capital. Spending reduces leverage. Investing increases leverage. But not all investing increases leverage equally. Speculation without understanding increases fragility. Ownership of durable assets increases stability. Builders seek durability. Durability compounds. Fragility collapses under volatility. Now let's move to decision frequency. If you must constantly chase new opportunities, your leverage is weak. Strong leverage reduces opportunity hunting. Opportunities begin coming towards you. Reputation becomes inbound leverage. Skill depth becomes magnetism. Ownership becomes gravity. This is structural dominance. Now examine energy. Energy applied to leveraged assets multiplies. Energy applied to linear labor depletes. The same effort can produce different outcomes depending on leverage structure. This is why builders do fewer things, but more deeply.
Depth increases defensibility. Defensibility protects leverage. Without defensibility, scale becomes fragile. Now let's address ego. Many people pursue visibility over leverage. Visibility without ownership is exposure. Ownership without visibility can still compound. Builders prefer control over applause because applause fades. Control compounds. Now examine optionality again. A leveraged position gives you choice. Choice reduces pressure. Reduced pressure improves decision quality. Improved decision quality compounds further leverage. Average thinking operates under pressure. Pressure compresses thinking. Compressed thinking reduces filter quality. Poor filters increase fragility. The leverage filter protects against this. Now ask yourself, does this opportunity build something reusable? Does it increase ownership? Does it reduce dependency? Does it scale beyond effort? Does it create long-term asymmetry? If the answer is no, it may still generate income, but it does not build position. Builders prioritize position over income because position eventually produces income at scale.
Income without position must be defended constantly. Position produces income naturally. Now examine risk tolerance. Average minds avoid risk entirely. Builders accept calculated risk when leverage is asymmetric. Small controlled downside, large potential upside. This requires analysis. Analysis requires patience. Patience requires identity stability. Everything connects. Now consider time allocation. If your schedule is filled with urgent tasks, leverage cannot develop. Leverage requires deep work. Deep work requires protected focus. Focus requires filtering. Filtering requires saying no frequently. Saying no increases strategic clarity. Clarity improves leverage decisions. Now examine consumption. Consumption reduces capital. Capital deployed intelligently increases leverage, but capital includes more than money. It includes attention, reputation, skill, time, network. How you deploy each determines leverage trajectory. Now let's address comfort. The leverage filter often rejects attractive short-term wins. That feels uncomfortable. Because short-term wins provide validation, but validation does not scale. Structure scales. Builders sacrifice small wins for structural advantage. This is rarely visible publicly, but it determines long-term divergence. Now reflect. What percentage of your decisions increase leverage? What percentage maintain comfort? What percentage are reactive? The answers reveal your architecture. The divide is not talent, it is evaluation. Builders do not see more opportunity, they filter better. They eliminate noise faster. They protect capital longer. They compound residue consistently. In the next chapter, we examine risk directly. Because leverage without risk assessment is fragility. And the average mind misunderstands risk completely. Let's continue.
Chapter 8. Risk, avoided versus calculated. Most people believe there are two types of individuals: risk takers, risk avoiders. That model is inaccurate. There are actually three types: those who avoid risk blindly, those who take risk emotionally, and those who price risk strategically. Builders belong to the third group. The average mind associates safety with avoidance. Avoiding risk feels intelligent. It feels responsible. It feels mature. But risk cannot be eliminated. It can only be transferred. When you avoid visible risk, you often accept invisible risk. For example, avoid investing, you accept inflation risk. Avoid ownership, you accept dependency risk. Avoid entrepreneurship, you accept employment volatility risk. Avoid skill expansion, you accept obsolescence risk. Risk does not disappear. It relocates. The average mind only sees immediate risk. Builders see structural risk. Structural risk is long-term vulnerability embedded in your positioning. Let's define risk properly. Risk is not volatility. Risk is the probability of permanent damage. Volatility is movement. Permanent damage is structural loss. Average thinking confuses the two. When markets fluctuate, average minds panic. When builders see fluctuation, they examine fundamentals. They ask, has the structure changed? If the structure remains intact, volatility is noise. If structure erodes, risk increases. This distinction separates reaction from calculation. Now examine income. A salaried position feels stable. It feels safe. But if that income is your only stream, your structural risk is concentrated. One disruption eliminates cash flow. That is fragility. Owning multiple assets reduces structural risk. Diversification is not about maximizing return, it is about minimizing fragility. Builders understand fragility. They design against it.
Now consider entrepreneurship. Many view starting a business as risky, but remaining replaceable is also risky. Skill concentration in one narrow domain is risky. Lack of ownership is risky. Risk cannot be avoided, it must be evaluated. Builders ask, what is my downside? What is the probability of that downside? Can I survive it? If the upside works, how asymmetric is it? This is pricing risk. Pricing risk transforms fear into calculation. Fear thrives in vagueness. Calculation thrives in clarity. Average minds avoid risk because they do not measure it. Builders measure before acting. Measurement reduces emotional reaction. Now examine asymmetry again. If you invest $1,000 in something where the maximum loss is $1,000, but the upside could be $20,000, that is asymmetric. If you invest $1,000 for a potential gain of $1,200, but a downside of $1,000, that is poor asymmetry. Builders seek asymmetric exposure, small downside, large potential upside. This requires patience and discipline. It requires saying no frequently. Now let's examine personal risk tolerance. Most people believe they are risk-averse. In reality, they are volatility-averse. They fear fluctuation, but they tolerate structural stagnation. They tolerate slow decline. They tolerate missed compounding, because those risks are invisible. Builders invert this. They tolerate fluctuation, but they avoid structural stagnation, because stagnation compounds negatively. Now consider skill investment. Learning a difficult skill requires time. There is opportunity cost. Short-term income may slow. Average thinking avoids this discomfort. Builders accept short-term discomfort for long-term leverage. They price the opportunity cost. They calculate the compounding benefit. Risk is not eliminated. It is selected intentionally. Now examine information. Information asymmetry reduces risk. Builders study before exposure. They analyze, they research, they understand downside scenarios. Preparation reduces uncertainty. Preparation reduces emotional volatility. Most panic is caused by ignorance. Knowledge reduces fear. But knowledge requires time. Time requires patience. Everything connects. Now consider leverage and risk together. Leverage amplifies outcomes, both positive and negative. Therefore, leverage must be paired with calculated exposure. Too much leverage without understanding increases fragility. Too little leverage eliminates growth. Builders operate within tolerable exposure. They do not overextend. They do not bet survival capital recklessly. They protect the foundation. Foundation protects longevity. Longevity allows compounding. Now examine the difference between speculative risk and strategic risk. Speculative risk is based on excitement. Strategic risk is based on structural reasoning. Speculative risk follows trends. Strategic risk follows analysis. Speculative risk depends on timing precision. Strategic risk depends on long-term asymmetry. Speculative risk is emotional. Strategic risk is mechanical. Builders eliminate emotion from exposure decisions. They build rules. Rules prevent impulse. Impulse increases fragility. Now let's address fear directly. Fear is often a signal of unfamiliarity, not actual danger. The first time you invest, it feels dangerous. The first time you negotiate ownership, it feels uncomfortable. The first time you reject a safe path for a structural one, it feels unstable. Fear does not always indicate risk, it often indicates growth. Builders separate emotional discomfort from structural danger. They ask, is this emotionally uncomfortable or structurally unsafe? These are different categories. Average minds conflate them. Now examine portfolio thinking beyond markets. Your career is a portfolio. Your skills are a portfolio. Your capital is a portfolio. Builders diversify intelligently, not randomly. Diversification reduces catastrophic risk,
But over-diversification dilutes leverage. There is balance. Calculated exposure requires calibration. Calibration requires reflection. Reflection requires slowed thinking. Slowed thinking improves risk pricing. Now consider optionality again. Optionality reduces risk. The more options you have, the less exposed you are. Options require positioning. Positioning requires design. Design reduces fragility. Fragility amplifies risk. Builders increase optionality before increasing exposure. This is sequence discipline. Sequence matters. If you scale before stabilizing foundation, collapse probability increases. Most failures occur from sequence error, premature expansion, premature leverage, premature visibility. Strategic builders delay exposure until foundation can absorb volatility. Now examine confidence. True confidence is not loud. It is calculated. It is grounded in analysis. It understands worst-case scenarios. It is prepared for them. Preparation reduces panic. Panic increases structural mistakes. Structural mistakes compound negatively. Calculated risk prevents this. Now reflect. What risks are you avoiding because they feel uncomfortable? What risks are you accepting unknowingly because they feel normal? Stagnation risk, obsolescence risk, dependency risk, inflation risk, skill decay risk, reputation risk. These are often more dangerous than visible volatility. The divide between average and builder is not bravery, it is measurement. Builders measure downside before exposure. They understand probability. They respect fragility. They protect longevity. They price asymmetry. They accept calculated volatility. They reject blind avoidance. In the next chapter, we move into something even subtler, energy. Because even with correct leverage and risk pricing, most people misallocate energy. And energy, not effort, determines compounding. Let's continue.
Chapter 9. Energy Allocation. Why wealth is built by protecting focus, not maximizing effort. The average professional believes productivity is about doing more. More hours, more tasks, more meetings, more projects, more output. Builders understand something different. Wealth is not built by maximizing activity. It is built by maximizing directional energy. Effort is raw force. Energy is directed force. Force without direction creates motion. Direction without force creates theory. But energy applied with clarity creates leverage. Most people are exhausted not because they lack capacity. They are exhausted because their energy is fragmented. Fragmented energy produces fragmented results. Fragmentation prevents depth. Depth produces asymmetry. Asymmetry compounds. Now examine the modern environment. Notifications, messages, updates, news cycles, market volatility, endless input. Every input competes for your cognitive bandwidth. Bandwidth is capital. Attention is capital. Focus is capital. If your capital is constantly depleted, leverage cannot form. Builders treat attention like money. They invest it deliberately. They protect it aggressively. They withdraw it from low-yield environments. Most people allocate attention emotionally. They react to urgency. They respond to noise. They chase novelty. They defend ego. Builders allocate attention structurally. They ask, does this move my position? If not, it is deprioritized. Energy allocation determines output quality. Quality determines durability. Durability determines compounding. Now examine effort again. You can work 12 hours per day, but if those 12 hours are spent on low-leverage tasks, progress remains linear. You can work 4 focused hours on high-leverage positioning. That may compound exponentially. The difference is selection.
Builders optimize selection before effort. They ask, what deserves my energy? Most ask, how much energy do I have? This inversion changes outcomes. Now let's explore focus. Deep focus is uncomfortable. It lacks stimulation. It requires isolation. It requires reduction of input. Most people cannot tolerate deep focus for extended periods because it removes novelty. Builders understand that deep focus is where leverage is constructed. Shallow engagement maintains operations. Deep engagement builds structure. Structure compounds. Operations maintain status quo. If you are constantly maintaining, you are not expanding. Expansion requires focused build time. Builders design their days around build windows, not reaction windows. Reaction is necessary, but it is scheduled. Build time is protected. Protection creates depth. Depth creates defensibility. Defensibility increases leverage. Now examine decision fatigue. Every decision consumes energy. If your day is filled with trivial decisions, you reduce energy available for strategic ones. Builders eliminate unnecessary decision cycles. They automate routine processes. They create default rules. They reduce friction. Reduced friction preserves energy. Preserved energy improves strategic thinking. Strategic thinking improves leverage. Now consider emotional energy. Emotional volatility drains cognitive clarity. Anger, comparison, envy, status anxiety, fear of missing out. Each consumes mental resources. If your emotional state fluctuates constantly, your energy allocation becomes unstable. Builders regulate emotional exposure. They reduce social comparison. They limit reactive inputs. They detach from performative environments. Not because they are immune, but because they understand cost. Energy lost to emotional turbulence cannot be reinvested. Now consider the myth of multitasking. Multitasking fragments attention. Fragmented attention reduces depth. Reduced depth limits asymmetry. Asymmetry requires sustained focus. Sustained focus requires monotasking. Builders design sequential attention cycles. They complete before switching. Completion builds momentum. Momentum increases clarity. Clarity improves positioning.
Now examine meetings. Many professionals spend most of their energy in reactive discussion. Discussion does not equal progress. Builders measure meetings by leverage output. If a meeting does not increase position, it is reduced or eliminated. Time spent must correlate with structural return. Otherwise, it is maintenance. Maintenance is necessary, but maintenance cannot dominate. If maintenance dominates, growth stalls. Now consider the difference between busy and positioned. Busy people are always active. Positioned people are often quiet. Silence does not mean stagnation. Silence often signals deep build cycles. Builders are comfortable with low visibility during construction. Average minds equate visibility with progress. Progress is internal before external. Now examine creative energy. Creative thought requires uninterrupted cycles. Each interruption reduces complexity handling. Complexity produces leverage. If you cannot hold complex models in your mind, you cannot design asymmetric systems. Attention depth determines design quality. Design quality determines compounding power. Now examine personal life boundaries. Energy leakage occurs through unmanaged commitments, excessive obligations, unclear expectations, poor boundaries. Builders establish constraints. Constraints protect energy. Protected energy builds structure. Structure compounds. Now let's examine effort maximization. Some believe the answer is simply to work harder. Hard work without prioritization increases exhaustion. Exhaustion reduces clarity. Reduced clarity increases poor decisions. Poor decisions reduce leverage. The cycle becomes destructive. Builders prioritize energy renewal. Rest is strategic. Recovery improves cognitive sharpness. Sharpness improves decision quality. Quality compounds. Now examine attention markets. Companies compete for your attention. Social platforms monetize your distraction. News cycles monetize urgency. Builders recognize this as environmental competition. They do not participate passively. They withdraw. They filter. They create input rules. Rules protect bandwidth. Bandwidth produces depth. Depth produces leverage. Now consider long-term identity. If you identify as someone who must always be available, your energy will fragment. If you identify as someone who builds, you will protect deep cycles. Identity shapes allocation. Allocation shapes outcomes.
Now examine strategic isolation. Isolation is not withdrawal from society. It is withdrawal from noise. Builders create intentional isolation periods. During these periods, they construct. Construct what? Assets, systems, frameworks, relationships, intellectual property. These are high-leverage outputs. They cannot be built in fragmented attention cycles. Now consider the difference between urgency and importance. Urgent tasks demand attention. Important tasks demand intention. Urgent tasks rarely build leverage. Important tasks usually do. Builders prioritize importance over urgency. This requires discipline. It requires tolerating delayed response. It requires confidence in direction. Average thinking responds immediately. Builders schedule response strategically. Now examine feedback loops. Energy invested in high-leverage assets generates reinforcing feedback. Small progress builds momentum. Momentum reduces friction.
Reduced friction increases consistency. Consistency compounds. Fragmented energy produces inconsistent output. Inconsistency prevents compounding. Now ask yourself, where is your energy currently allocated? Maintenance, reaction, comparison, or construction? Construction requires design. Design requires clarity. Clarity requires silence. Silence requires discipline. Discipline requires identity alignment. Everything connects. Now examine long-term performance. High performers are not those who burn brightest. They are those who sustain clarity longest. Sustainability compounds. Burnout collapses leverage. Builders design sustainable energy cycles. They pace intensity. They alternate build and review cycles. They avoid continuous reactive exposure. Now consider capital again. Energy misallocation is equivalent to capital misallocation. Both reduce return. Both increase fragility. Energy once spent cannot be recovered easily. Builders treat energy as irreplaceable capital. They invest it carefully. Now reflect. If your energy doubled tomorrow, would your leverage increase? Or would your activity increase? Activity without direction multiplies chaos. Energy with direction multiplies leverage. The divide is not effort. It is allocation. In the next chapter, we move from energy to systems. Because energy alone cannot sustain leverage. Systems must carry weight beyond human effort. And systems are where builders separate permanently from the average.
Chapter 10. Systems over effort. Why systems outperform hard work long term. Hard work is finite. Systems are scalable. That distinction defines the expansion gap. Most people rely on effort. They push harder. They extend hours. They increase output. They grind. But effort does not compound by itself. It exhausts. Systems compound. Effort is human. Systems are structural. Humans fluctuate. Systems persist. Builders understand this early. Average thinking says, if I work harder, I'll earn more. Builder thinking says, if I build correctly, it will earn whether I work or not. That is not laziness. It is architecture. Now define a system clearly. A system is a repeatable process that produces consistent output without requiring constant decision-making. It reduces cognitive load. It reduces variability. It increases predictability. Predictability compounds. Variability increases fragility. Most people operate manually. Manual decisions. Manual tracking. Manual follow-up. Manual execution. Manual marketing. Manual management. Manual everything. Manual structures collapse under scale. Systems absorb scale. Now examine income. If income depends entirely on your presence, you do not have a system. You have labor. Labor pays. Systems multiply. Builders shift from labor-based output to system-based output. Automation is one dimension. Standardization is another. Delegation is another. Ownership is another. Now examine financial systems. Automatic investing. Predefined allocation percentages. Rule-based portfolio adjustments. Budget automation. These reduce emotional interference. Emotion disrupts compounding. Systems neutralize emotion. Emotion is volatile. Systems are consistent. Consistency builds leverage. Now consider career systems. Documented workflows. Templates. Repeatable frameworks. Decision checklists. Builders do not reinvent processes daily. They create replicable structures. Replicable structures scale. Scale increases leverage. Now examine content creation. A one-off effort generates one-off results. A distribution system generates recurring exposure. Builders design pipelines. Pipelines generate consistent flow. Consistency builds authority. Authority compounds into opportunity. Opportunity increases optionality. Now examine health. Energy without a system fluctuates. A health system stabilizes output. Sleep structure. Nutrition planning. Training routines. Recovery cycles. These are systems. Stability increases cognitive clarity. Clarity improves decisions. Decisions compound. Now examine time. Most calendars are reactive. Meetings dictate movement. Requests dictate focus. Builders design calendar systems.
theme days, deep work blocks, review cycles, quarterly resets. Time becomes structured capital. Structured time compounds output. Unstructured time evaporates. Now examine relationships. Network without system decays. Systematic follow-up. Scheduled outreach. Intentional value exchange. These compound trust. Trust builds leverage. Leverage attracts opportunity. Now examine the psychological barrier. Systems require upfront effort. Effort that feels unproductive. You build templates. You build processes. You automate flows. You standardize procedures. Early phases feel slow. But once installed, systems reduce decision fatigue. Reduced fatigue improves clarity. Clarity improves positioning. Positioning compounds. Average thinking avoids systems because effort feels more immediate. Builders accept short-term setup cost for long-term output stability. Now examine scale. Hard work scales linearly. Systems scale multiplicatively. If you double effort, output may increase marginally. If you double system reach, output may expand exponentially. This is why ownership matters. Ownership of assets is a system. Equity is a system. Intellectual property is a system. Distribution channels are systems. They produce without hourly negotiation. Now examine delegation. Delegation without system creates chaos. Delegation with documented process creates scale. Builders design before expanding. Sequence matters. System first, scale second. Most scale prematurely. Without system, scale magnifies inefficiency. Inefficiency compounds negatively. Now examine failure. When effort fails, morale collapses. When system fails, it can be adjusted. Systems are modular. They can be optimized. Effort-based models collapse when the individual collapses. System-based models survive fluctuation. Durability increases leverage. Now examine wealth generation. Wealth is rarely built by constant heroic effort. It is built by small, consistent system outputs. Recurring revenue. Reinvestment loops. Equity growth. Automation layers. Each layer increases resilience. Each layer reduces dependency. Dependency limits optionality. Optionality increases power. Now examine data. Systems allow measurement. Measurement allows optimization. Optimization improves output. Effort without measurement is guesswork. Guesswork increases fragility. Builders measure systematically. Quarterly reviews. Performance dashboards. Portfolio evaluations. Feedback loops. Without measurement, growth stalls. Now examine discipline. Systems reduce reliance on motivation. Motivation fluctuates. Structure stabilizes. Builders do not depend on feeling productive. They depend on process integrity. Process integrity compounds. Now consider reputation. Consistency builds brand equity. Brand equity is a system. Trust reduces friction. Reduced friction increases transaction velocity. Velocity increases compounding. Now examine cognitive bandwidth. Systems free bandwidth. Freed bandwidth allows strategic thought. Strategic thought increases asymmetry. Asymmetry multiplies leverage. Manual operations consume bandwidth. Bandwidth depletion reduces foresight. Reduced foresight increases reactive decisions. Reactive decisions reduce positioning. Everything connects. Now ask yourself, what in your life operates without you? What continues if you step away? Income streams? Investment allocations? Skill growth? Network strengthening? Content distribution? If nothing moves without you, you are effort dependent. If systems operate independently, you are building leverage. Now examine identity again. Effort-based identity is ego-driven. I work harder than anyone. System-based identity is architectural. I build structures that work for me. Architecture outperforms intensity. Intensity fades. Architecture compounds. Now examine
friction. Systems reduce friction. Reduced friction increases execution rate. Increased execution improves consistency. Consistency builds momentum. Momentum compounds. Now examine strategic advantage. The expansion gap widens because average thinking remains effort-bound. Builders become system-bound. Effort-bound individuals hit ceilings. System-bound individuals break them. Now consider this. If you worked half as hard but had twice the systems, would your output decline? Likely not. If you worked twice as hard but removed your systems, would output remain stable? Likely not. The answer reveals leverage. In the next chapter, we shift from systems to identity transition. Because building systems is not enough, you must shift from consumer to constructor. And that shift is psychological. Let's continue. Chapter 11. From consumer to constructor. The shift from spending cycles to asset cycles. There are two dominant financial identities in modern society: consumer, constructor. Most people believe they are building, but structurally, they are consuming. Consumption is not just spending money. It is a mindset. It is orientation. It is how you interact with the world. Consumers absorb. Constructors produce. Consumers react to opportunity. Constructors create position. Consumers seek access. Constructors build ownership. That difference defines the expansion gap. Now examine the consumer cycle. Earn, spend, upgrade, repeat. Income increases. Lifestyle increases. Expenses scale with visibility. Position remains unchanged. This cycle feels like progress because surface quality improves. But surface improvement is not structural advancement. Structural advancement requires ownership. Ownership compounds. Consumption depreciates. Now examine constructor cycles. Earn, allocate, build, reinvest, repeat. Income is treated as fuel. Fuel is deployed into assets. Assets produce output. Output is reinvested. Reinvestment compounds. The difference is subtle but decisive. Consumers optimize lifestyle. Constructors optimize position. Lifestyle is visible. Position is structural. Now examine emotional triggers. Consumers respond to validation cycles. New purchase. New upgrade. New signal of progress. These feel rewarding. Constructors delay validation.
They redirect capital into invisible assets: equity, skill, distribution, reputation, systems. These are not publicly celebrated, but they increase leverage. Now consider environment. Modern economies are designed around consumption. Marketing reinforces identity through ownership of products. Status signals are consumption-based. Constructors operate counterculturally. They ask, does this increase leverage? Instead of, does this increase lifestyle? This shift requires discipline. Discipline requires identity realignment. Now examine spending behavior. Consumers expand expenses when income rises. Constructors expand asset allocation. This single divergence compounds dramatically over time. If two individuals earn identical income for 10 years, one expands lifestyle, one expands ownership. Their outcomes diverge exponentially, not because of income, because of allocation philosophy. Now examine time. Consumers spend time consuming information, entertainment, opinion, trend cycles. Constructors consume selectively, then convert input into output. Output builds leverage. Passive intake does not. Now examine skill development. Consumers acquire skills for income. Constructors acquire skills for ownership and scale. One focuses on employability. The other focuses on leverage. Both can earn. Only one compounds structurally. Now consider financial psychology. Consumers see money as purchasing power. Constructors see money as positioning power. Purchasing power creates temporary satisfaction. Durable power creates durable expansion. Temporary satisfaction resets quickly. Durable expansion compounds. Now examine ego. Consumers measure progress by visible upgrades. Constructors measure progress by invisible assets. This requires detachment from comparison. Comparison fuels consumption. Clarity fuels construction. Now examine leverage again. Consumers trade capital for experiences. Constructors trade capital for systems. Experiences fade. Systems persist. Persistence compounds. Now consider relationships. Consumers seek networks for access. Constructors seek alignment for creation. Access is transactional. Creation is structural. Structural relationships produce long-term leverage. Transactional relationships produce short-term advantage. Now examine economic cycles. Consumers are vulnerable to volatility. Constructors are buffered by assets. Assets absorb fluctuation. Consumption amplifies fragility. Fragility increases stress. Stress reduces clarity. Reduced clarity impairs positioning. Everything connects.
Now examine identity reinforcement. Consumer identity is reinforced socially. Purchases signal belonging. Upgrades signal progress. Constructors often appear slower initially because asset building is quiet. Silence can feel like stagnation, but silence often indicates structural build phases. Now examine capital allocation beyond money. Attention capital, emotional capital, reputation capital, skill capital. Consumers disperse these broadly. Constructors concentrate them strategically. Concentration increases leverage. Diffusion reduces compounding. Now consider this question. If your income doubled tomorrow, would your lifestyle double, or would your ownership double? The answer reveals your identity. Now examine habits. Consumers ask, what can I afford? Constructors ask, what will this become? Consumers measure affordability. Constructors measure scalability. Now examine long-term trajectory.
Consumer cycles are predictable. They plateau when income plateaus. Constructor cycles accelerate. Assets layer. Systems stack. Reinvestment loops strengthen. Momentum compounds. Now consider psychological resistance. Why do most remain consumers? Because construction requires delayed gratification. It requires discipline. It requires saying no to visible reward. It requires tolerating slow build phases. It requires resisting social validation cycles. It requires internal measurement. Internal measurement requires identity strength. Most seek external validation. Builders rely on internal metrics. Now examine education systems. Most training emphasizes employment. Few emphasize ownership. Few emphasize system building. Few emphasize asset creation. Constructors must self-design this shift. It is rarely provided structurally. Now consider leverage stacking. Each asset layer increases stability. Financial assets, intellectual assets, distribution assets, relational assets, brand assets. These layers interconnect. Interconnection increases defensibility. Defensibility increases resilience. Resilience compounds. Rarely consumers stack assets intentionally. Constructors do. Now examine decision filters. Consumers evaluate purchases by desire. Constructors evaluate by leverage. Desire fluctuates. Leverage compounds. Now consider the compounding gap. 10 years of consumption produce lifestyle memories. 10 years of construction produce structural dominance. The divergence widens quietly. Now reflect. Are you upgrading comfort or upgrading position? Are you expanding expense or expanding ownership? Are you chasing validation or building leverage? The divide is not income, it is identity. Consumer identity is easy. Constructor identity is designed. Design requires awareness. Awareness creates shift. In the next chapter, we complete the arc. Because shifting identity is not enough. You must cross the divide permanently. And that requires rewiring decision architecture at the deepest level. Let's continue.
Chapter 12. Crossing the Divide. Rewiring your decision architecture for expansion. The divide is not dramatic. It is not announced. It is not visible in a single decision. It is crossed quietly. Through repetition. Through filtering. Through design. By the time the outcome becomes obvious, the architecture has already been in place for years. Most people believe the divide is financial. It is not. It is structural. It is the difference between reacting and positioning, between earning and owning, between activity and architecture, between urgency and patience, between consumption and construction.
Now the question is not whether you understand the divide. You do. The question is whether you will rewire for it. Because knowledge without structural change is intellectual entertainment. Rewiring begins with decision architecture. Decision architecture is the invisible framework that determines how you evaluate choices. It is not what you decide once, it is how you decide repeatedly. Most people make decisions emotionally, then justify them logically. Builders design decision filters in advance, so emotion cannot dominate evaluation. Now examine your current architecture. When faced with opportunity, do you ask, how fast can this pay? Or do you ask, how does this compound? When faced with risk, do you ask, what if I lose? Or do you ask, what is the asymmetry? When faced with income, do you ask, what can I upgrade? Or do you ask, what can I own? These are architectural signals. Small differences, massive divergence. Now consider rewiring. Rewiring is not intensity, it is constraint. You must constrain impulsive decision patterns.
constrain urgency, constrain comparison, constrain ego-driven allocation. Constraint creates clarity. Clarity strengthens positioning. Now examine exposure. Your environment influences architecture. If you are constantly exposed to consumption triggers, your filters weaken. If you are constantly exposed to urgency cycles, your patience erodes. Rewiring requires environment selection, input discipline, attention discipline, network discipline. Most people underestimate environmental influence. Builders curate it deliberately. Now examine identity reinforcement. If you still measure progress by visible signals, you remain vulnerable to consumer cycles. If you measure progress by asset growth, leverage stacking, and structural strength, your behavior stabilizes. Internal metrics determine external outcomes. Now consider time horizons again. Crossing the divide requires permanent extension of time perception. 5 years becomes normal. 10 years becomes practical. Decades become strategic. Short-term cycles become noise. Noise loses power. This is not optimism, it is structural recalibration. Now examine capital allocation. Crossing the divide means capital is never idle without purpose. Cash has role, assets have role, skill development has role, energy has role. Every allocation must answer, does this increase leverage? If not, it must justify its presence. Now examine effort. Effort remains necessary, but it is applied selectively. Effort fuels system building, not reactive maintenance. If effort is constantly consumed by maintenance, expansion halts. Expansion requires build time. Build time requires boundary enforcement. Boundary enforcement requires identity strength. Now consider fear. Crossing the divide does not eliminate fear, it reduces its authority. Fear becomes data, not dictator. Builders feel discomfort, but they evaluate structurally. Emotion no longer overrides filter. Filter overrides emotion. Now examine patience. Patience without direction is drift. Patience with architecture is compounding. Crossing the divide requires both patience and evaluation. Neither alone is sufficient. Now examine failure. Failure within a leveraged structure becomes information. Failure within a fragile structure becomes collapse. Builders design for survivability. Survivability ensures longevity. Longevity enables compounding. Compounding defines expansion. Now examine independence. Independence is not isolation, it is optionality. Optionality comes from ownership. Ownership comes from allocation. Allocation comes from discipline. Discipline comes from identity. Everything connects.
Now consider what must change. Not your ambition, not your intelligence, not your effort. Your filters, your time horizon, your capital allocation patterns, your environmental exposure, your definition of progress. Rewiring is not glamorous, it is repetitive, daily, quiet, often invisible. But over time, architecture compounds. Most people do not fail because they are incapable. They fail because they never redesign their decision system. They chase outcomes without changing filters. They increase effort without increasing leverage. They seek income without building position. The divide widens slowly. Then, suddenly. Now ask yourself honestly, if you continued exactly as you are for 10 years, where would your positioning be? Not your income, your positioning. Would you own more? Control more? Leverage more? Or simply maintain lifestyle? That projection reveals architecture. Now consider this. Crossing the divide requires sacrificing the comfort of reactive identity. You must detach from comparison cycles. Detach from urgency validation. Detach from consumption signaling. Detach from surface upgrades. This is not minimalism. It is structural prioritization. Now examine the final shift. When you evaluate decisions through leverage, asymmetry, time, and ownership, you no longer feel rushed. You no longer feel behind. You no longer chase. You position. Positioning reduces anxiety because direction is clear. Clarity stabilizes behavior. Stability compounds. Compounding creates separation. Separation becomes visible only after years of invisible discipline. This is the divide. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is not emotional. It is architectural. And it is permanent. The divide is not between rich and poor. It is between those who position and those who react. Choose your architecture.
The audit. Pause for a second. Not because the audiobook is ending, but because something else just ended. The excuse that you didn't know. You can't say that anymore. You now understand leverage. You understand systems. You understand time horizons. You understand positioning. So if nothing changes after this, it won't be ignorance. It will be preference. That's the uncomfortable part. Most people don't stay average because they're incapable. They stay average because average is predictable. It's socially safe. It doesn't isolate you. It doesn't demand discipline at a level your environment doesn't understand. Positioning does. Building does. Ownership does. Leverage does. And that's why most people nod at this information, but don't redesign around it. Because redesigning means auditing yourself, auditing your spending, auditing your inputs, auditing your effort, auditing your excuses, auditing your identity. And audits remove comfort. Here's the real divide. Some people use information to feel smart. Others use it to change structure. One group replays this to feel inspired. The other replays this to examine themselves. That's the split. Not talent, not luck, not timing, application. So let me ask you something that will sit with you after this ends. If someone studied your last 90 days, your calendar, your bank statements, your screen time, your conversations, your habits, would they conclude you are building leverage or maintaining lifestyle? Be honest, because that's the only metric that matters. You don't become wealthy by wanting it. You become wealthy by architecting for it. And architecture is visible in patterns, not promises, not plans, patterns. And patterns don't lie. If your patterns don't change, your position won't either. You don't need a new goal. You need a new filter. You don't need more motivation. You need less reaction. You don't need another strategy. You need consistency in one. That's it. Simple, uncomfortable, structural. Most people will let this end and return to noise. A few will sit in silence and start redesigning, quietly. No announcement, no post about it, no dramatic pivot, just different decisions. Repeated. That's how the divide is crossed. Not loudly, not emotionally, but architecturally. And the next time you replay this, it won't be because it sounded powerful. It'll be because you're checking whether you actually changed. The divide is not between rich and poor. It's between those who audit and those who avoid. Silence. And remember, average is accidental. Wealth is engineered. End.
If this message spoke to you, share it. Subscribe. Keep listening. This is Beyond the Noise Studio.